On the 28th of April, Spain held general elections to elect all members of the Congress and part of the Senate. There are various issues that arise from an analysis of results, both in the national reality and the regional European reality. There's a change in the balance of forces, which we will aim to analyze, and also to look at what it means for the way in which the anti-Venezuelan Bolivarian campaign, which has predominated in Europe, will develop now. So, Spain, the route to a new government and the repercussions in Europe. That's what we're looking at today in Critical Moves. And looking at the interests of the different actors involved. Do they converge? Are they different? We'll have a look. The PSOE, the Socialist Party of Spain, with its leader Pedro Sanchez, began on Monday a first round of negotiations and contacts with the main leaders of the other parties to look at how they will be able to govern. What's the possibility for agreements with each of them? On Monday, Sanchez received the leader of the PP, the Popular Party, Pablo Casado, and then he also met separately with the leader of Ciudadanos, Albert Rivera, and the leader of Podemos Unidas, Pablo Iglesias, the third and fourth placed parties in the elections. Rivera said no means no, we will not vote for Sanchez taking up the government. The first round excluded, but from these conversations was excluded Vox, the new party which entered parliament for the first time. My first impression that we will have a parliament with a weak government, and in the Popular Party there will be a strong opposition, but a responsible opposition. We haven't looked deeply into possible pacts, but I would call on Sanchez not to depend on the separatists. We believe that we need parties that reflect the interests of their communities. In Spain, we need a responsible economic policy to improve competitivity, to create jobs. We think taxes need to be lowered, and that the program of stability, which has been sent to the European Union with an increase of 23 million euros in taxes, is not the right solution. So, with our 26 seats, we think that yes, there will. Our first fast pace is to fulfill the Constitution. So we are prepared to lead an opposition to Sanchez, a firm opposition to a government of the Socialist Party and Podemos, but an opposition which is loyal to the Spanish people. So we will be free, without corruption, an opposition that has a future. So, before today's meeting, Pablo Iglesias of Unidas talked about a coalition, while Pedro Sanchez has talked about governing alone. The Socialist Party has to take the initiative, and we, since the meeting, from the meeting tomorrow, which we've been called to, we will express our willingness to talk, to form a government with a broad parliamentary base, to be stable, and to promote a progressive program. We will do that aware that we will have a duty. We all need to listen. We need to build a new stage of collaboration without any red lines, without arrogance, with clarity, and with the truth ahead of us. In our case, we make clear that whether we are supporting from the outside or part of the government, we will take the basic decisions of our citizen assemblies, the basic bodies of Podemos, I want to go to Moncloa tomorrow to communicate to the Socialist candidate our desire to collaborate, to make a good coalition government, to guarantee stability, which ensures left-wing policies and a new period of collaboration between progressive forces, which is what Spain needs. So, how does the board look after those examinations? Let's have a look at the map.
Pedro Sanchez,
Pedro Sanchez, the leader of the PSOE, won the elections on the 28th of April. He almost doubled the number of seats compared with the PP. These two parties have 46% of the vote compared with 85% they had last time, right, in 2008. Sanchez benefited from the fragmentation of the right. In 2019, the Socialist Party has 123 seats in the lower house out of 350. It's not enough to govern alone, so they will need alliances to form a government, possibly after the 20th of June, after the local, regional and European elections. So Sanchez is having talks to organize a government that could include, these talks include PP, Ciudadanos and Podemos. The far-right Vox Party has been left out of those talks, but the PSOE has said that it wants to govern alone with just specific agreements to guarantee its ability to govern. So there will be on the 26th of May, there will be new government elections in regional governments, thousands of mayors, and for the European elections. So this complicates the scene for the formation of a new government. So no party will play all its cards until it sees how it does in those elections on the 26th of May. The Congress is the one which will need to elect a president of the government, a prime minister, which needs an absolute majority of 176 votes in the first round. If he doesn't manage that, there will be a second vote where it's only a simple majority required. So, let's look at some of the press coverage and commentary. There's this in the which Casado is comparing Casado to Rajoy in 2008 because they had similar defeats. Casado lost 71 seats. Casado admitted that the results were very bad, but said, but we should not be in mourning or resigned. We need to shake off the dust and make sure these disappointing numbers are not repeated in the local and regional elections in 20 days' time, nor in the European elections. He believes that things have come out the same as for Rajoy in 2008, but after a time they will be proven right. Let's look at some Latin American coverage. Prensa Latina on the 6th of May, published by its correspondent in Madrid, that two courts in Madrid have decided to allow Puigdemont and two former members of his government to stand as candidates in the European parliamentary elections on the 26th of May. This overturns a decision by the Central Court to withdraw them from the independent list, saying that they're not resident in Spain. What's the argument for this overturn? That the being in rebellion does not remove their eligibility to stand in those elections. The three are outside of the country and could be arrested after their attempted secession for Catalonia in October 2017. So it's unlikely that they'll be able to take up their seats in the European Parliament if they're elected, but at least their participation would test their popularity. In the Latin American Strategic Center for Geopolitics, CELAG, we find this analysis from Alfredo Serrano and Sergio Pascual, published just after the elections. Spain, more to the left than the right. It says that the bi-party system has ended. We've gone from 2 to 5 parties with a national impact. The PSOE returns to be the biggest force in a social democracy which has been badly depleted in Europe. It's doubled its number of seats. And while the right has suffered a severe defeat. But it's been a big blow for the PP, and that really puts its future in question.
Y bueno, acá dice, todo parece indicar que asoma algo de estabilidad a la política española. Frase que también conservo para luego preguntársela a nuestros invitados.
We have some more questions on that for our guests. But first, let's talk to our correspondent in Madrid, Adriana Cardoso, to understand the details of the electoral system in Spain, which is sometimes quite difficult to understand. Hello to Jugada Crítica. Welcome from Madrid. The results of the elections was a clear victory for the Socialist Party. They got 123 seats, which is enough to be the only party with a real ability to form a government, but it's not enough to be government on its own. So, in the Spanish electoral system, there are two ways in which the candidate, the leader of the Socialist Party, can become the Prime Minister. Firstly, they'll be a round with an absolute majority and a second round with a simple majority. So, for the first option, Sanchez would need the support of Podemos, the Basque National Party, and probably of 3 deputies from one of the Catalan independence parties. In the second round, if it goes to a second round, which is most probable, where there's just a simple majority needed, there he could get through with Podemos, with the abstention of they would only need the abstention of the independence parties. So that's the scene. It will take time to work all this out. It's a slow process. So it's too soon to talk about exactly the makeup of a coalition government, because from the 21st of May, it could take 2 months. In those 2 months, we have the elections, the regional, the municipal, and European parliamentary elections. And that's having a big impact on the political scene, because the parties will behave depending on their results in those elections. And they won't reveal their positions until after that. For the moment, as we say, it's too early to say what the form of the government will be, but the Socialist Party is saying it wants to rule alone, but just with particular agreements with different parties to sustain it in Parliament. But the other possibility is a big left coalition with... But that's not the plan of the Socialist Party at the moment. So we'll have to see what happens in those elections coming up at the end of May. But it does seem clear that Pedro Sanchez will be the next Prime Minister. So let's ask, how do these elections leave Spain in the European scene? And more broadly, geopolitically. But let's go bit by bit. So, Spain, the route to a new government and the impact in Europe. We continue our analysis on critical moves. Let's go to El Mundo, which has the title Elections 2019, Pedro Sanchez wants to rule alone. There's some in this article was published on the 6th of May with some ideas for us to consider in our analysis. A new historic phase in Spanish politics. And it says, socialist sources understand that there's been a change in Spanish society. Ideology is not so important anymore. Stability is more important. The parties have lost their trust, their loyalty. 400,000 votes from the PP have gone over to the PSOE, and another 400,000 have gone to abstention. And it says that a strong right and a strong left is needed if we're going to have a parliament of change, according to that article. But certainly one part of the right, the traditional right, which fell dramatically, and another called the extreme right by many and regarded as xenophobic, discriminatory, anti-feminist, and against autonomy, which rose in the polls, obtained significant results, and is acquiring popularity, although some say it's dangerous and threatening. So let's take a look. One of the most important facts in the elections, in the Spanish elections on the 28th of April, was the rapid rise of Vox, the far-right party, which took advantage of the media and erupted onto the political scene, winning 24 seats in Parliament for the first time that the far-right has entered Parliament, and coming close to the traditional parties. This went hand-in-hand with the dramatic fall of the traditional right-wing party, the Popular Party, of the ex-president, Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy, who was sacked for corruption in 2018. They only won 33%. Vox won its biggest vote in Andalusia and in the capital, Madrid. In Catalonia and the Basque Country, it did very badly. In both regions, the nationalist forces and left separatist forces came out stronger. The Vox results were hailed by the ultra-right in Europe, like Marine Le Pen, Matteo Salvini in Italy, Giorgio Matteo in Alemania. Some suggest that the far right could obtain 20%, and in Hungary, Fidesz, and in Polonia, and with the group Law and Justice Party. And there are also groups in many other European countries. But in the Netherlands, the far-right party only won 14%. Spain was one of the last countries to have a strong far-right, anti-feminist, anti-immigrant party. So, let's go to analysis. Let's ask our guests. We're joined from Valencia by Carlos Martinez, international analyst who collaborates with many international media, including Telesur, and from Paris, Christian Rodriguez, political analyst and responsible for Latin America and the Caribbean for international relations for France and Sumise. Carlos and Christian, welcome. Carlos, how does Spain stand after these elections, do you think?
Hola, buenas tardes, Lucía.
Good afternoon, Lucia.
Pues en España yo creo que se ha normalizado para bien y para mal. Para mal se ha normalizado España con el resto de Europa por la aparición de las instituciones
with the appearance of a clear far-right party, which is anti-feminist, anti-immigrant, xenophobic, and so forth. That has now become a part of the Spanish political scene. So they defend bullfighting, they defend a whole series of right-wing causes. For me, it's a party which has changed its name and its initials, but it's very similar to the rest of the far-right xenophobic parties in Europe. But many voters from the right have voted for the lesser evil, and the lesser evil is the Social Democratic Party, and that includes PSOE and Podemos. At the same time, while the right in Spain was split into 3 parties, the electoral system in Spain punishes a split vote. So the right in all gains somewhat less than the left. So there's been a vote against Vox and for the electoral democracy. But in Spain, with a social democratic party governing without needing but at the same time, a far-right party entering the institutions for the first time. But the right in Spain is quite happy with the emergence of Vox in Parliament. So that's a general view from Carlos. What you say, we have to continue looking in terms of this polarization between the left and right. So let's ask Christian, but looking at Spain, but also looking at the situation in Spain and Germany, this emergence of Vox in Parliament for the first time, which came out quite well, and the dramatic fall of the Popular Party at the same time. What do you make of that? Good afternoon. I'm very happy to hear with you on critical moves. I share much of what Carlos said, although I couldn't hear all of it. I think we have to remember some fundamental things and draw some lessons from these elections, from my point of view. Firstly, Vox did not appear overnight. Vox is the most extreme wing of the PP, and which split and decided to form this separate far-right movement, similar to in other European countries. It's the most extreme wing of the PP. Before, you didn't need an extreme right because you had Aznar or Rajoy in power. Now, Vox is a pole of attraction for the far right. At the same time, the fundamental struggle is against the neoliberal model. If we don't understand that, we think that the big sort of cordon sanitaire would be everybody united against Vox. But the fact is, the right-wing parties have a very radical program in terms of ideology. It's true that we see a very extreme neoliberalism in all of Europe, and Spain has said no, let's call a halt to that with the victory of the PSOE. This is linked to the experience in Portugal. What Portugal did in terms of alliances. In that sense, so we're not clear why the PSOE is saying it won't take the next step of forming a broad coalition with Podemos, but it is possible for it to rule as a minority government. So they may play with some of the most vulnerable sectors of society, move to the left, move to the right. The question, but now the bi-party system has been broken, but it doesn't break with the scheme between left and right. I'm very happy with the big blow to the traditional right. That was a major step in putting an end to the PP and its years of ultra-liberal policy and corruption. And the PSOE will have a responsibility to get out of this crisis of hunger and poverty, which is hurting the working class and the poorest in society, and to create politics which are alternative to neoliberalism. More than left and right, it's a question of an alternative to neoliberalism. Thank you, Christian. Carlos, coming back to you, in terms of what Christian was saying about the breakdown in the bi-party system, do you think we're looking towards a coalition government with a programmatic agreement with Podemos and Pablo Iglesias? Should we exclude that option? I just want to point one thing. The Spanish system has never really been a bi-party system. The Congress has already had the nationalist parties, the Basques and the Catalans, and also the United Left, which has had a significant parliamentary presence. In that sense, the situation hasn't changed so much. We have new parties on the right, that's new, but there's a lot of pressure on the Socialist Party from capital. On the one part, Ciudadanos is a right-wing party, like the PP, and wants to occupy the space left by the Popular Party, so they don't want to join a government with the PSOE. But there's also pressure from the membership of the Socialist Party, who are more to the left, not to form an alliance with Ciudadanos. So it's a question of whether PSOE listens to capital and doesn't join up with Podemos, but they will need to adopt social measures of the kind that Podemos have proposed. Before, when the United Left had Julio Anguita, they kept talking about the program rather than trading government posts. It's a shame these principles have been lost, and it seems now, when just talking about the more seats in government that Podemos can get, the more left-wing it will be, and that's a shame. I think they could agree social policies and to overturn the Popular Party's labor reform, similar agreements like that. I think what Podemos has to have, rather than demanding seats in the cabinet, is to impose policies, changes to the penal code. I think that should be at the center of the discourse for forming a new government.
y no tanto el reparto de cargos.
and not so much just splitting up the jobs. The CELAC talked about the plurinational nature of the Spanish state and the issue of Puigdemont, whether he can stand in the European elections. So the question of whether the PSOE can, will they need to form alliances with separatist nationalist forces? Christian. So one of the questions we asked at the beginning, do you think, are we looking at a period of continuity or of fundamental changes, radical changes? What do you think? We want to get rid of all these laws that have been built over during the PP's governments of a neoliberal character. But for that it needs a political decision. As Carlos says, there's a lot of pressure on the PSOE from the business class. They think that the business class that run Europe and run Spain, and they try to dictate the norms in Europe, the basic neoliberal rules of the game in Europe. So this question of changes, but the people don't believe in those neoliberal politics anymore, and they don't believe in the political maneuverings. There are more elected members of parliament in prison in Spain now than ever in Spain. So, to be able to advance towards eliminating these policies of the PP, but there's an obligation from the PSOE to make allies to the left. So what's clear, the right don't want anything to do with PSOE, much less the far right. Ciudadanos, which is center-right, if you like, or the PSOE makes an option for the poor, for the vulnerable, the excluded, and build a majority around the government of the majorities. So the historic responsibility is in the hands of the PSOE. Right now there's a press conference. Pablo Iglesias is giving a press conference to see what came out of that meeting. He met Sanchez, but this game that I like you, I don't like you, coming with me or you're not coming with me, is really not very serious given the degrees of poverty and exclusion that the Spanish people are living through. In the European context, we need a Europe of the workers, a Europe of struggle against neoliberalism. In the few minutes left, Carlos, change or continuity, and also the question that the Catalan question will be key in this new parliament. So let's just finish with those two issues. The government we have now hasn't been there long. In the last 9 months, I think it will be continuity. In terms of Catalonia, I don't think there'll be anything very new. The Republican left, the second independent party, in their own areas, are pro-independence. I think it's possible solution. The Catalan question
y el PDK tuviera la mayoría en Cataluña. Yo creo
won't
que
have a solution if we go on with the old policies.
Dan un aire dan un espacio a la esperanza
There
para
has to be space for hope
el problema catalán y que no
to solve the
haya
Catalan
políticos
question.
que me parece una auténtica vergüenza.
Muchísimas gracias, Carlos.
Thank you, Carlos.
Nuevamente el agradecimiento y siempre la bienvenida a
And thank you to Christian Rodriguez and to you, Carlos. Thank you to our guests. And we come back to another point in this CELAC article. It's all about stability. It will be difficult for the establishment to deal with a PSOE that is allied with Podemos and with the independence forces. And we want to look at the symbols that come out of this attitude of Spain towards Venezuela, which in the past few years has been often supporting conspiracies and campaigns against Venezuela. So will this continue to be the case, or will there be a new posture, a new stance towards Venezuela? We'll be coming back after the break with another guest. So we go on. So one point we want to deal with in this part. In the 21st century, Spain, the old colonial power, continues to see itself as the spokesperson of Latin American countries in the European Union, although nobody authorized that role. On the other hand, the old colonial power is absolutely submissive to the United States. Let's look at that. In terms of international relations, the government of Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has made absolute submission to the interests of the United States. The relationship with Venezuela shows that. The ambassador of the United States, Duke Buckham, told the Spanish government on the 23rd of January that member of the National Assembly, Juan Guaidó, would proclaim himself president and the United States would recognize him. Once that happened, the Minister of Foreign Relations of Spain, Josep Borrell, had a meeting with that U.S. diplomat, and he said to the press that for the United States it was very important, the opinion of Spain and Portugal in the Venezuelan crisis, because of their capacity to influence the rest of the European Union. With that declaration, it was clear that the old colonial metropolis tries to maintain that role as an interlocutor of the interests of certain nations of America and the Caribbean. Then the Spanish government officially communicated its intention to lead the position of the European Union. Days later, it was reported that the White House had pressed the European country to take that stance. The future mandate of Pedro Sanchez can hardly expect much difference in terms of its position and interference in Venezuela. Nonetheless, there are contradictions. The former Prime Minister, José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, has accompanied the elections which gave the victory to Nicolás Maduro and said he found no irregularity there. He also accompanied the process of dialogue that some months ago reached an agreement, but from which the right-wing opposition withdrew just before signing the document. February 2018. So let's go now. We have our guest on the set, Alejandro Fierro, journalist and political analyst from Spain, who lives in Venezuela and is a member of the CELAC board. Thank you for joining us. So, talking about the role of Spain in the European Union in relation to Venezuela, I'd like to ask you, even if the bi-party system has broken down in Spain, I think Spain has suffered a political earthquake, which was the big crisis of 2008, when the housing boom collapsed. And that meant unemployment went to a very high, up to 33%, or the huge number of people being, 500 families being evicted from their houses every day. So this is the fact that lies behind the breakdown of the biparty system in Spain. First, Podemos emerged, then Ciudadanos, and then Vox. So the political system in Spain is being reorganized in a turbulent situation, so there can be violent movements in the vote from one end of the spectrum to the other. And that's what has happened in Spain. And I think a proper analysis of the situation, we have to remember that crisis has not been fully overcome. It's become embedded. The wages are very precarious, are very low. Employment is very precarious. Youth unemployment is still very high. More people unemployed than working. The phenomenon of migration. So understanding all that, nobody can understand the political earthquake which has meant the emergence of these new parties. With these results, so we're coming up to the regional municipal elections on the 26th of May and the European elections. I think what's happened nationally will have an impact on the regional and local level and the European level. Not necessarily, we won't necessarily see exactly the same results. It may be that PSOE is again the most voted for party, but will they form pacts to form governments in the regions? But there could also be a serious right-wing bloc from the three right-wing parties. Something new that's developed in the last few years, which is governments, regional governments, governed by the United Left and Podemos in coalition, like Madrid, in Zaragoza, in Barcelona, all of which have these left-wing alliances in government regionally. The administration in the last 4 years have been very well received by the population in Madrid in terms of contamination, in terms of transport, the reduction of the debt. Madrid had a very big debt. We can say the same in Barcelona, where Ada Colau is the mayor. So we have these new experiences, which are not so well known, but were very important for a process of change. In Valladolid, in Castilla y León, we have a new convergence of progressive parties, of the Izquierda Unida in alliance with social movements and the PSOE, have come together to resist neoliberal policies, reverse some privatizations, and putting the interests of citizens over the interests of transnationals. Basic services like water and electricity are very expensive in Spain, amongst the most expensive in Europe relatively. And these coalitions have shown that it's possible to govern for the people and not for the transnationals, and in labor relations to govern for workers and not for capital. These are very interesting experiences, which we have to look at. I don't know if we have time to go into all of these issues. I want to know to what extent the situation in Spain has an impact in Europe. Of course, there are more important countries in Europe, in France, Germany, and Great Britain, which hasn't yet left the European Union. But of course, Germany, France, Italy have bigger weight than Spain, but nonetheless, Spain is an important point of reference where you can anticipate some things.
La propuesta política que mandaban en el mundo era una propuesta extrema, dura, fuertemente ideologizada, los Bolsonaros, los Trump.
The extreme right in the world, the Bolsonaros, the Macris, the Trumps, and these elections, the victory has gone to a call for stability and a call for moderation. So it's clear that the majority of the Spanish people have voted for moderation. Podemos Unidos carried out a campaign calling for common sense and reflected a certain stability. So we may be seeing a certain change in the global political situation. And what about, will this new government play an important role in relation to Venezuela? Because before it was clearly playing an important role in the conspiracies against Venezuela. Since the 50s, during the Franco dictatorship, Franco's dictatorship was given legitimacy by the United States. That has not changed. We may have a more moderate discourse, a more conciliatory discourse, but Spain doesn't have an independent foreign policy. It's very submissive to the United States. So I don't expect any substantial change in that. But I think maybe the discourse will be a little bit more moderate. But in terms of foreign relations, Spain does not have an independent policy. So we just have a little time left. Talking about the right, there's a discourse of the right without shame, a right that presents itself as being authentically right, even neo-fascist, but which has a certain echo in European public opinion. This cataclysm that developed in Spain economically after 2008 meant that a lot of certainties collapsed. Europe is ever more unequal between the rich and the poor. The middle class are getting poorer. All this produces fear, and fear produces parties of the right, of the far right. They're not fascist in a strict sense, but it's kind of fascism had a much more state-centered economic policy, whereas these new parties of the extreme right are clearly neoliberal, anti-state. But clearly we need to look for responses, answers, to understand why these have emerged and how to respond to them. They blame immigrants, they blame women, who gain more power through the feminist movement, and a part of the population who are frightened, looking for answers, and they get hold of these extreme right-wing proposals and take them on. This is a phenomenon that needs to be understood and confronted. In France, so far there hasn't been a big anti-immigrant movement in Spain, with some local exceptions. This is a voter, these are voters who've always been there. So the spectrum on the right is split up, fragmented. There's a strong Catholic Franco element and now a new far-right element.
Alejandro, muchísimas gracias por estar acá.
Thank you very much, Alejandro, for being with us. So we've taken note of all these points made by our guests. Let's go to the conclusions. So some of the things that we've taken note of. The political pendulum goes from one side to the other. Does this condition the certainties that citizens have who want stability, the need to find people responsible for the crisis which hasn't been resolved? There's a reorganization of the political map. Sometimes it's turbulent. The voters have broken free of traditional parties to some extent, with other new parties emerging. And although the triumph went to the Socialist Party, which now has to enter into this process of negotiations, and it's clear that the far right has now broken into the institutions, which represents a radical extreme, Vox, anti-feminist, anti-LGBT, anti-human rights. The results, which they obtained on the 20th of April, they won't necessarily be reflected on the 26th of May, but they will have an influence. And certainly Spain is not the most important country in the European Union, but it has significance, and so it can have some impact on international relations. No big changes, but maybe more moderation. Those are the conclusions we've reached so far. We'll have to see exactly whether there's more continuity or more change in Spain. Thank you.